All right, so we got an email coming from somebody named, I think it's Yana, is how you say that. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. She is experiencing all kinds of different symptoms, and we're going to be reading her story. I'm going to give some encouragement, some insights, as well as at the end, she has a question that she wants to ask me. So make sure to subscribe, click the like button, comment, share this video. Let's go ahead and get going. So she says, Jordan, I am currently experiencing depersonalization and derealization, but I want to share that I've overcome it more than 10 times in my life since I was 17, and I'm now 49. So the first thing that comes to mind is something is off here. Because if depersonalization, derealization keeps coming back, it's not that you're recovering every single time that the symptoms are gone. It's just that you're having extended breaks from symptoms that you're confusing with recovery. Whenever you're truly recovered, it means that you've lived a preventative lifestyle to the point that the symptoms just won't come back. You are self-regulating. You are keeping the tension, adrenaline, negative emotion, and fatigue out of your body. You are listening to your body and not overworking yourself. You're prioritizing diet, sleep. You're basically just living a very healthy, calm life, and especially, as I said, making sure that you're keeping the tension out of your body. And if you do that, you will prevent the symptoms from happening. Now, I'm not saying that people can't have a situation where it just comes out of nowhere and maybe the symptoms happen for just a short period of time. But even in that situation, it would probably just be a one-time thing and you'd be able to get over it very quickly. In fact, I had a client very recently, well, I should say a former client who had been recovered for a long time, and they ended up having, let's just say, a very severe trauma, a major trauma, so a sudden overwhelming state of stress. And depersonalization, realization did come back, but they were able to get over it within, I think they said, like a few days or something like that, because of what I had taught them. So most people that really get in tune with their body, which is interoception, the experience of the embodied self, and they start to release the buildup, they go through the process of desensitizing their sensory triggers with exposure paired with relaxation, and they start to live a lifestyle where they're not pushing their body beyond its limits. The symptoms of depersonalization, realization are probably never going to come back. So with that being said, as soon as I see that it's been 10 times that the symptoms keep coming back, I don't think that you've overcame the symptoms 10 times. I think that you've probably done things to temporarily mitigate the symptoms, but there's something off here, and we're going to dig into this a little bit deeper. You said, when life's challenges overflow my cup, it tends to resurface. Aha, what does that tell us? That tells us that there's not the appropriate level of self-regulation, because if life throws you, I should say, when life throws you challenges, because life is extremely difficult, if you're living a very calm life and you know how to keep the tension out of your body, to release the tension, adrenaline, emotion, and you're getting proper rest, proper nutrition, and you just know how to handle things, you're not going to probably be too overwhelmed by situations. Every now and then, like I said, life will throw you a curveball, but for the most part, you'll be able to handle it. And that's what I've experienced over the years, right? Like I went from being so easily thrown off in life. You know, one bad thing would happen and I would be down for months, sometimes years. I've had some situations that were so overwhelming and I did not know how to self-regulate, and I didn't have co-regulation, which is somebody else there to make me feel calm and safe. I remember one in particular, a situation that happened. I mean, it set me back for like 3 years, where I had all kinds of triggers and avoided this person that caused the trauma. And he was a very important person to me. He was actually a Christian leader, which, if you have experienced religious trauma, by the way, I just want you to know, I'm sorry about that. I know that it's hard. I know that it's very, very frustrating, but I've been in your shoes, and I will tell you there is healing. I used to have so much religious trauma that I couldn't even drive by a church without being really, really angry. And I remember there was one church that I would drive by on the interstate, and every time I would drive by it, I would just turn my head away because I didn't even want to see a church. I didn't want to read the Bible. I didn't want to do anything because my brain associated that with this religious trauma that I had. A Christian leader had said some extremely hurtful things to me, somebody that I looked up to more than you'll ever know. And in the end, I forgave and I processed and I moved on. But religious trauma can really come out of nowhere, and it really does cause you to have a lot of issues, even with God, because with complex trauma in particular, so if there was like repeated ongoing stress for a long period of time and adversity, sometimes your brain will collapse the entire category. And so if you have repeated painful religious experiences, sometimes your brain will collapse the whole category of religion and say, you know what, it's all dangerous, and, you know, God doesn't even love you. And none of that is true, by the way. And I'm not going to get too religious on you. I respect that there's a lot of different opinions out there. But if you've gone through religious trauma, just know that it hurts, it's gut wrenching, but God still loves you. And you need to feel the emotion, and you need to forgive, and you need to move forward with what God has called you to do. So anyway, there's my little religious spill. But with that being said, when life throws you curveballs, if you've already been building resilience, if you've already been self-regulating, if you've already been getting good sleep, if you've already been eating right, if you already have a healthy focus, if you have resilient mindsets, if you have people around you to help support you, you would be surprised at how much that life really won't throw you off too often. So let's keep going. Listening to your content and being part of your supportive community has given me hope that I can recover once again. We need to redefine recovery. Remember that. Recovery is not the most recent longest break that you've had from symptoms. Recovery is whenever you're living a preventative lifestyle, listening to your body, self-regulating. You've got boundaries with people to make sure that you're not a people pleaser and overworking yourself or doing things that you don't have energy for. That's whenever you're truly recovered. And that's what I teach people how to do whenever they work with me, is we're not just going to have a symptom-centric approach, which may mitigate the symptoms, sometimes even for years. We're going to really get to the root, which is primarily things happening in the body that need to be taken care of. And what's happened is people, as a defense mechanism, have not been in their body, which is the source of the trauma, right? Trauma is a body that is constantly preparing for a threat that never comes. And whenever your body is constantly going into fight, flight, freeze response, we're designed to get back to homeostasis. And whenever you don't know how to do that through self-regulation, and you also don't have the benefit of co-regulation, somebody else there to make you feel calm and safe, you get back to balance through somatic dissociation. You start to live in your head all day. You do things to numb your body. And so maybe like accepting the symptoms or distracting away from them may get you temporary results, and you mistake that for recovery. But what I do with my clients and what I did with myself to get permanent recovery is we deal with the root, which is mainly things happening in their body and also in their life. So one of the first things I teach people is interoception, which is the experience of the embodied self. See, so many people are disembodied, meaning that they're living in their head to escape feeling all the pain happening within, all the negative emotion, all the fatigue, all the tension, adrenaline, things like that. And once you get back into your body, then you can start to feel again. Then you can start to release. I always tell people trauma healing begins with feeling, right? Trauma is a body that is constantly on guard, preparing to fight, flee, or freeze. And so we've got to get you back in your body, releasing the buildup, and then that will help start to communicate safety to your nervous system, and then eventually your nervous system will start to downregulate. But you also need co-regulation, which is a safe person to help you walk through that process as you're learning how to self-regulate. I've heard it said that self-regulation is like riding a bicycle, right? You're learning how to release the tension, adrenaline, emotion in your body. You're doing exposure to sensory triggers, things like that. Co-regulation is like training wheels on a bicycle, right? That's that supportive person to come alongside you to help guide you, because like whenever you're riding your bicycle, I remember whenever I was riding mine growing up, I would always fall over. And then eventually they put training wheels on. And then I got the feeling of riding the bike without having to fall over. And then eventually the training wheels came off. And so if somebody works with us, our goal is to get them to where they don't need us, right? Where they can fly on their own, where they can self-regulate and live their life on their own. But especially healing from things like depersonalization, derealization, which are trauma coping mechanisms, it is so up and down that it's really important for most people to have co-regulation. I've seen some people be able to do it without it. Whenever I recovered, I had very little co-regulation, not by choice, but I would say definitely try to find that person or group of people that can really help you through this process. Doesn't have to be me and my team, just anybody that can really make you feel safe and calm and build hope in you, that's great. But definitely, if you'd like to work with us, there are definitely tons of opportunities for that. All right, let's keep reading. So this person says, I'm hopeful that you'll collaborate with me on this journey and help me make lasting changes to keep DPDR at bay. Absolutely. So I want to share my genuine and raw experience with DPDR. DPDR means depersonalization and derealization, by the way. I'm sure if you're watching this channel, you probably know that by now. So I want to share, as this is my first time opening up about this powerful and unexpected battle with my own body, I've often questioned, why me? So let's stop there for a second. Whenever your body is in a trauma state and you feel like death and you feel like giving up, it's going to be easy to take on a victim mentality. And I'm not saying that people are not victims sometimes. A victim is somebody who's not empowered. I've been a victim before. I was a victim of narcissistic abuse several times. I've been a victim of bullying before. But the moment that you become empowered is the moment that you have to strip away the victim mentality, because at that point it is just a mentality. If you are empowered and yet you're still having the mentality of a victim who is not empowered and who is waiting on somebody to rescue them, that's like being a superhero, but yet you're waiting on the superhero to save you. Right? You are your own hero. That's what I tell people. Like, your body has a built-in capacity to heal itself. The problem is you just haven't had the conditions for healing put into place, which is primarily self-regulation and co-regulation. And so I'm going to give you some tips. I'm also going to point you to some resources that will empower you. Maybe you actually are a victim. I don't know that, but I just want to tell you that at least after we get done with this video and you get pointed to some of these resources that I'm going to point you to, once you're empowered, now it's time to take action. And you can't keep that mentality of why me. Nothing will keep you stuck more in life than having a victim mentality whenever you're empowered. Right? So anyway, with that being said, I've been there though. I know it hurts. And I used to ask that all the time. I'd be like, God, why did this have to happen to me? Like, why do I seem to get hit with all of these negative experiences? Sorry, my lips keep getting really dry. It's chap lip season. I had some chapstick somewhere. But anyway, with that being said, and I'll never forget whenever things started to change for me. Instead of me just waiting for the next bad thing to happen and hoping that I reacted the right way, I started to go on the offense. Right? I started to go out on the attack. I started to say, you know what? I accept that bad things are going to happen in life. I'm going to stop being in denial of that. I'm going to stop believing that maybe all the bad things will stop happening and my life will just be tiptoe through the tulips. And when the next bad thing happens, I'm going to be ready. And I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to process the emotion. I'm going to keep my body relaxed. I'm going to reach out to other people to get support through the journey. And I remember the last part of what I did, I think there was like 7 things that I wrote down. I'm going to get back up and I'm going to keep moving forward. And I'll never forget whenever I went out on the offense and something bad happened to me. And I remember specifically what it was. Instead of me being down for months or years, I was able to get back up within like 5 or 6 days because now I had a strategy. Now I wasn't living on the defense, right? In warfare, if you're living in defense of your enemy, you're losing the war. So whenever it comes to dealing trauma or just dealing with the challenges in life, you have to go out on the attack. You have to go out on the offense. And what that looks like is getting a strategy together that is designed to deal with the root of what you're going through. So anyway, with that being said, that changed my life. All right. Initially, my symptoms manifested as a sense of fogginess, making it difficult to connect with everyday objects, nature, my own body, or even people's faces. Nothing seemed three-dimensional, and my eyes would strain from trying to perceive depth. Ooh, I've had that happen before. That was extremely... I even got my eyes tested thinking that it might be a vision issue. I see this literally all the time with my clients. I've seen this like 3 or 4 times in the last week. People will be having all kinds of visual issues. So light sensitivity, static dots, black dots, white dots, brown dots sometimes, blurred vision, double vision, and just all kinds of visual disturbances. Eye floaters, of course, the little, floaty, dancy little things that happen in your eyes, which, by the way, those are always there. It's just that whenever you're in fight or flight response, your pupils dilate. And so you're letting in more light, and thus you are essentially just able to see the eye floater. So it's not that they're just suddenly showing up. It's that they were always there, but because your body is in fight or flight response and you have light sensitivity, you're able to see them. I always tell people, think of light sensitivity as like, shining light into a really dark room. Like, let's say there's a dark room, it's got dust everywhere, and then you open up a light. Well, now you're able to see the dust, but it doesn't mean that it's just now there. It means that you're just now able to see it. And so it's important to know that. So, anyway, with that being said, yeah, and then people go to the optometrist, and the optometrist is like, well, we checked your eyes, and there's really nothing wrong. So we don't really know what to tell you, right? This happens all the time. Soon this feeling of fogginess gave way to numbness, and I would describe it as feeling like my soul had withered away, unnoticed by anyone but me. That's crippling. My laughter felt distant. My voice didn't sound like mine, and I barely recognized my reflection in the mirror. Just a vague face staring back at me. I remember what that felt like. I remember speaking, and my voice was like super loud. My ears were super sensitive. And also, I remember it not sounding like my own voice. I didn't have an emotional connection or a mental connection to my voice. Also, I looked in the mirror and I literally saw a complete stranger. I remember looking at my face and my eyebrows seemed off and my mustache seemed off. And I felt like I looked like my brother, which we look similar, but it was terrifying. And so I responded by not looking in the mirror anymore. But that actually only perpetuated the problem, because whenever you start to avoid things, your brain assumes that whatever you're avoiding is dangerous. So anyway, and I also just didn't feel emotionally detached. I didn't feel emotionally attached to my loved ones. And I remember looking at some of my family members, and it felt like the history that I had with them was completely erased. It felt like, even though like I had the knowledge that we had known each other for a long time, I couldn't access that knowledge. And they seemed just very almost like movie-like. Like I was watching them on a movie. Everything felt like a movie, which is Derealization. But it felt like I was almost in like a dream sequence or something, and I was watching my loved ones kind of acting almost, and it was really, really bizarre. I would have relentless external thoughts about my identity and soul, triggering immense anxiety and internal panic. Time lost its meaning and days seemed to stretch endlessly. Yeah, so I mean, I remember being at work whenever I was going through depersonalization, derealization, and many other symptoms. This was the second time that I experienced DPDR. The first time was kind of, you could say, the straw that broke the camel's back was a bad marijuana experience. And then I went through about a year of symptoms, and I used acceptance to get out of the symptoms. But because I didn't actually deal with the root of what was happening in my body and life, the symptoms came back years later, and then acceptance didn't work. But anyway, the second time that the symptoms came back, I remember especially time felt distorted, which that happened the first time as well. But especially the second time, I remember it was constantly happening. I would be at work and I would look down at my watch, and it would feel like the entire day went by in like 1 minute. Or sometimes 1 minute would feel like it took an entire day. It was really, really bizarre. And that's because in a trauma state, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex starts to shut down, which is the timekeeper of the brain. And so it makes time just feel very, very distorted. I tried to cry, but the emotions were trapped behind a window, soundless and stuck. Yeah, and whenever your body goes into fight, flight, freeze response, anything that's not paramount for survival will get temporarily put on hold, and that includes processing emotion. All right, think about it. If you're trying to fight, flee, or freeze from a lion, do you really need to be processing your emotions at that point? Our salivary glands get suppressed. That's why people get dry mouth whenever they're anxious. People also have a suppressed immune system, because there's really no point to have your immune system functioning if you're in a survival context. Digestion is suppressed. There's really no point to be, digesting the pizza that you ate for lunch if you're fighting, fleeing, or freezing from a lion. But anyway, all these things get put on hold, and that includes emotional processing. So once people start to get into a calm body, and especially once they have co-regulation and their brain starts to perceive safety, which is called neuroception, all of a sudden their emotions will start to automatically process. But if you're experiencing emotional numbness, it's most likely because your body is in either a deep state of fight or flight response, or even in a trauma response. The closer you get to a trauma state, which is a point of overwhelm, the more that you're going to see a shutdown of things, right? That's what a trauma response is. It's also called the shutdown response or the freeze response. It's basically your body shutting down, not fully, of course, in preparation to be eaten by a lion. I've actually got a video that I show my clients of an impala, and there is a leopard that comes up and is kind of trying to eat the impala, but the impala is playing dead, and it looks literally like it's dead, but it's not. This is the freeze response. It's an ancient reptilian response that is designed to convey to a predator that it's dead, so that way it loses interest and walks away. And so anyway, with that being said, the more traumatized you become, ultimately the more numb that you'll become. So anyway, with that being said, let me keep going. My head often throbbed as if my brain was wrestling with something, but to no avail. Back in the 90s, there was little awareness of these symptoms, and neither online communities nor family and friends could relate, which added to my anxiety. I grappled with whether to surrender to the feeling or fight it, but neither option seemed effective. I felt disoriented, much like Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, so I mean, that's the thing, is whenever you really don't know what the root of the symptoms are, you're naturally going to try to fight the symptoms. Speaking of depersonalization, realization specifically, which are, feeling out of body, feeling detached from your personality, your emotions, as well as derealization, which is where everything feels fake and dreamlike. Those symptoms are terrifying. And whenever you start to experience them and you don't know why they're there, because the symptoms are so scary, you instinctually get into a war with the symptoms. You think, okay, the symptoms are the problem. I got to get rid of these symptoms, right? Think of it like, a fly is buzzing in your ear and you just instinctually start to swat at it. But the problem is depersonalization, derealization are trauma coping mechanisms, and trauma is not a past event. It's a present perception of threat where there is no threat, and your body constantly preparing to address that threat in the form of fight, flight, freeze response in the body. And so if you're spending all your time trying to get rid of symptoms that are biologically correct for the state that you're in, and you're not getting in tune with your body and releasing the tension, adrenaline, emotion, and fatigue, as well as making some lifestyle adjustment, whatever that looks like, walking away from people if you need to walk away from people, or just working from a place of rest, not overwhelming yourself and giving out energy that you don't have, right? Addressing the root. You're just basically a dog chasing your tail, and that's what I did. And that's what all my clients are doing when they come to me. They think that the symptoms are the problem, but they are not the problem. They're actually the solution, but they're a solution to a problem that you don't have, which is being in danger. So why are these symptoms showing up then? Well, because there's so much tension, adrenaline, emotion, and fatigue in the body, so much overwhelm in your life as well, that your brain thinks you're being eaten by a lion. And so to help mitigate the pain of being eaten by a lion, your body is deploying these autonomic defense mechanisms that are designed to make it less painful if you're being eaten by a lion. And so the real question that we have to ask is, why is there so much buildup in your body and life that your brain thinks you're being eaten by a lion? And then that will get us to the root problem, which are, we need to get you in your body, releasing the buildup of tension, energy, emotion, and fatigue. And then we need to look at your lifestyle, and we need to make some lifestyle adjustments and set up some boundaries in life. But anyway, with that being said, he said there was little awareness of these symptoms back in the 90s, and neither online communities nor family and friends could relate. Yeah. So as social media is becoming more and more accessible, creating a lot of addicts. Social media addiction is a very real addiction, and I'm guilty of getting sucked into the TikTok eternal web of scrolling, so no judgment, but it's also creating a lot of awareness about a lot of things, and that's a good thing. And one of those is depersonalization, realization. It's still very, very slow. And then trauma in general, right? We need a trauma-informed movement, and I think it's happening for sure, but there's still a lot of work to be done. But anyway, I couldn't imagine in the 90s. I mean, there was probably virtually nothing out there. Even whenever I was suffering with symptoms, there was literally very little out there to help with that. And then, you try to go to your friends and family, and if they've never experienced depersonalization, realization, they're going to look at you like you're losing your mind. They're going to be like, oh, okay, you feel detached from your body? Oh, okay. What do you mean? They're going to be like, okay, everything feels fake and dreamlike. Okay, well, I'm looking at you and you seem fine to me, so I don't really get it. Why don't you just take a walk? I hear this from my clients all the time, and my friends and family tried to help me too with things that didn't work. they'll tell you things that are just generally good things to do if you're stressed. Like, oh, just take a nap. Or like, hey, have you tried just talking to somebody about it? And they're trying to help, but they don't understand that you can be appearing fine on the outside, but on the inside, you feel like death. That's one of the most frustrating things about depersonalization realization is what's happening on the outside is not reflective of what's happening on the inside. And there's also really no test that can show that you're experiencing depersonalization realization. So it's not like, heart palpitations or other things. And so it's very difficult to convince people just how much that you're suffering. And then that just adds to the stress. And so what I tell people is don't try to convince people that don't understand depersonalization realization, because if you don't have experiential knowledge, they'll never, ever get it. And you're just adding a layer of resistance into your life that's just going to keep you stuck in symptoms longer, except that they will never understand it, is my advice to you. In my late teens, these symptoms made me question my sanity, and I had my first daughter as a way to leave a part of myself with my family just in case. Oh my gosh. So over the years, I lost the ability to emotionally connect with my family and partners. I often said I feel completely dead inside and ended relationships without a second thought. Greatly affects your relationships when you're in a trauma state, because whenever your body is constantly going into fight, flight, freeze response, those are survival states. And whenever you're in a survival state, it's about you surviving. And thus, you end up becoming selfish. And I don't mean selfish in a shame way or a negative way. It's just the reality that if your body is stuck in fight, flight, freeze, you can't focus on anybody else. Your social engagement system is shut down. That's the ventral vagal branch of the parasympathetic nervous system that allows us to socially engage and really look outside of ourselves. When you're stuck in fight, flight, freeze response, all you can think about is yourself, because you just feel so terrible. You just feel so miserable. You can't think. You can't concentrate. Your emotions are all jacked up. Like, especially with depersonalization realization, you feel out of body. You feel detached from reality. How could you focus on other people whenever you're going through those symptoms? And that's why it really negatively affects your relationships. And so that's why I tell people, that come to me to work with me, is I'm like, listen, if you're not dating right now, or not married, you probably should hold off on that for a little while. Because in a relationship, no people are perfect, but you really do need two people that are healthy, generally speaking. Those are the best relationships. Everybody's going to fall down, but most of the time, if you have two people that are healthy, whenever one falls down, the other's going to be feeling good and they can help get the other person back up. But if you've got one person who's always down all the time, or you've got both people that are going through a bunch of stuff, I'm not saying that it can't work and you can find a way to make it work, but it's going to be extremely challenging. And if you're not dating and you're not married and you're going through trauma and anxiety and depersonalization realization, I would suggest that you get to at least 80 to 90% recovery before you even consider dating, because it's not fair to the other person too, right? Like, what if Mr. or Mrs. Right comes up, but because you're in such a bad state, they really don't get a chance to know the real you, right? Like, they're missing out on the potential to know the real you. And then you're missing out too, because you can't really enjoy the kind of honeymoon phase and all the great things that happen in the beginning of a relationship. My cat is crawling around on my desk. Say hi. Hello. Anyway, love you, Lulu, but I gotta do this video. So anyway, with that being said, I would probably pause relationships for now. Now, if you are married or you are in a relationship, try to make it work for sure. But the person is going to have a lot of patience with you. And they're going to have also a lot of security, because it's very easy to feel insecure whenever the person that you're with is not giving you the things that you need. It's very easy to misunderstand that and take it personal, whenever in reality, it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with this person's state that they're in, and they're just suffering and going through hell. And it's going to mean that they're not in their social engagement system and they're not able to really connect with you the way that you want them to. And so you're going to have to be very patient. And the person is also going to have to really be dealing with the things in their body and life to get to the root. Otherwise, they're just managing symptoms, and it's really going to have a detrimental effect on their relationship in the long term. my love for life had faded and the symptoms had stolen so much from me, leaving gaps in my memory that will never be filled. Yeah, whenever you enter a trauma state, your memory is going to be greatly affected because your memory goes from being explicit narrative based memory to implicit procedural memory. And whenever that happens, you're basically just going to be able to remember bits and pieces of things that happened to you. And that's really frustrating because, we love thinking back on positive memories. But if you were in a trauma state whenever those memories happen, you're either going to have no memory of it at all, or you're going to just have bits and pieces. And so trauma memory is extremely frustrating. I remember I would just literally sit and just try to remember my history, but I just couldn't think of anything, especially my childhood, because I was in a trauma state and I wasn't experiencing explicit narrative-based memory. So I didn't have a narrative of beginning, middle, and end to draw upon. I just had little bits and pieces of things. This person said, I never wanted to burden my loved ones, even though I was suffering silently and profoundly alone. After a traumatic birth with my fourth daughter, anxiety crept in within hours, and postpartum depression rekindled my depersonalization realization for 6 months while caring for a newborn. I'm not sure how I made it through, but I clung to the hope that it would pass with each passing day. So what I will tell you is, having a baby is very, very taxing on the body, obviously. And I know that my mom actually told me that the only time that she experienced depersonalization realization was whenever she was giving birth. I don't think it was with me. I've got 2 other brothers. It was one of my brothers, and she said she literally just felt like very, very out of body. And that would make sense because of all the chaos happening in the body whenever she was giving birth. And so with that being said, then if postpartum depression kicks in, that can definitely just create a lot of nervous system dysregulation and trigger overwhelm, right? Depersonalization, realization are going to show up at the point of nervous system overwhelm, which is a trauma state. And it can happen due to virtually unlimited situations. And I also want to speak to, you said, I never wanted to burden my loved ones, even though I was suffering silently and profoundly alone. And that's one of the biggest dilemmas, right? Is you're experiencing symptoms that are invisible that nobody seems to understand. And yet you also don't want to be a burden to your loved ones. And so you kind of just try to fake it until you make it. And you're kind of emulating the mannerisms of normalcy, but on the inside, you feel like complete death. And that may work for a short period of time, but eventually, your friends and family are going to notice. And then that's going to create stress because then you're like, oh God, I tried to hide it, but now they're noticing it. And it's really, really important that we deal with the root of these symptoms. Each time DPDR returns, I experience the same symptoms, the same anxiety, and the same trauma. It feels like a relentless cycle of panic, tears, rumination, time off work, and attempts to explain to friends and family. Like I said, stop trying to explain to them, accept that they will never get it if they haven't experienced it. I've even found myself thinking that I'd rather have any other illness, even cancer, than endure this. It may sound raw and unforgivable to say, but I want to live with dignity, and DPDR strips you of everything you hold dear. I'm so sorry to hear of what you're going through, and I fully understand. I mean, I tell people, I would have rather gone through literally anything else than depersonalization realization. And if you've never experienced the symptoms, that sounds crazy, right? Like I tell people, like I would have rather been beat up constantly than go through depersonalization realization. I would have literally rather somebody beat me almost to the point of death than have to experience those symptoms. And you hear that and you're like, oh, they must be exaggerating. Well, if you think about it, depersonalization realization are death symptoms. People aren't dying, right? I assume if you're watching this video and if you're coming to work with me or something, you're not dying, but you're in a trauma state still because there's been such a buildup of tension, adrenaline, emotion, fatigue, and so much overwhelm in your life, your brain thinks that you're dying. And depersonalization and realization are so intense that they are powerful enough to dissociate you from the pain of being eaten by a lion. Think about how severe that would have to be to make you numb to being eaten by a lion. That is how severe depersonalization to realization are. They literally make you feel detached from your very being, detached from reality, which is not to be confused with psychosis, by the way. You know that you feel detached, right? Whenever you're in depersonalization realization, but in psychosis, you wouldn't even know that you're feeling or are detached because there is an actual break from reality in a psychotic episode. And let that encourage you, because the fear of psychosis is one of the more common fears that my clients have and that I went through whenever I was going through symptoms. But if you were in a psychotic episode, you wouldn't even know that anything's off. And so the very fact that you recognize that things are off should tell you not to be confused with the diagnosis. Make sure to see a licensed mental health professional for that. Anyway, so with that being said, being alone was terrifying, especially when your own brain and body become your adversaries. It's an exhausting battle that you rarely win. Yeah, and what I tell people is, like, once you make your body your safe place, like, you can be alone, you can travel, you can go anywhere, right? Because now you're able to be safely embodied and present, right? Whenever you have chaos happening in your body, it's going to be very uncomfortable being alone, because that's not going to have the advantage of kind of other people to distract you away from what's happening in your body. And then if you try to travel or get outside of your kind of home base, it's going to lead to a lot of anxiety too, because you're probably very codependent on external factors in order to feel calm, right? This is basically having an external locus of control instead of an internal locus of control. So essentially, I have to be at my house, in my room, and it has to be certain weather outside, and certain people have to be around, and, you know, things like that. And anytime that I see that, first of all, it reminds me of what I used to experience, but I basically can see that that person has not ever learned the art of self-regulation yet. They haven't learned the art of interoception, the experience of the embodied self, and learning to release the buildup of tension, adrenaline, emotion, and fatigue. And I'll tell you, once you do learn that, once you learn the art of self-regulation, and you can start to desensitize your sensory triggers with exposure paired with relaxation, you get proper co-regulation, man, it's really awesome. Like, you can start to enjoy your life again. You can start to travel. You can start to be by yourself if you need to be, and you can really move on from the symptoms. But until then, you're really dependent on all kinds of external factors being how you want them to be and how you need them to be to feel calm in order for you to regulate. My childhood was marked by a stepfather who was an alcoholic, leading to countless nights running to women's refuge houses and constantly changing schools away from friends and family. I was also placed in foster care for 2 years, which I believe may have contributed to my experience with DPDR starting as early as age 6. Whenever you have a family member who is going through things, traumas, addictions, it does affect you. This is called secondary trauma. A lot of people think that you have to directly experience something in order for it to be traumatic. But just witnessing things can be extremely traumatic. I mean, growing up and seeing your father being alcoholic, I don't know if that led to abuse, but you said you ran away to women's refuge houses and things like that. So that tells me that you were trying to get away from something. I don't know if he was directly hurting you or if he was just being belligerent or what, but that had a profound effect on your nervous system. There's no question about it. And then going through the foster care system, I know that there are absolutely some incredible people in the foster care system, but what I will also tell you is, you know, I hear constantly about people who go through that system and they walk out extreme trauma, let's just say, and just not having, you know, proper co-regulation, and just kind of having that mentality of like, oh, I'm in foster care, nobody loves me. Like, it's very detrimental. But, you know, these people are loved, obviously. But whenever you don't have a home of your own, a family of your own, there's just all kinds of things that happen that affect your identity, affect your nervous system. There's no question. So anyway, with that being said, I do believe that that led to the buildup. And I want to stop for a second and say, you notice how with this person, Yana, notice how it's not just one thing. And if you're experiencing depersonalization, realization on a constant basis, you probably can look back at your history and see that you've been through a lot. You've probably been through a disproportionate amount of stress than the average person. Not always, but most of the time, whenever somebody comes to me, it's complex trauma, meaning that you could think of it like, you know, kind of water pouring into a cup. The cup represents your body and the water represents stress, and it just builds up, builds up, builds up, builds up until you hit that overwhelm point. And that's whenever you enter a trauma state. And so what it sounds like is happening is because you're not self-regulating, which is no fault of your own, and because you probably don't have the right co-regulation either, the things that you're doing are mitigating your stress for a little bit. It's kind of dropping you just below an overwhelm point, but because you're not self-regulating, doing exposure paired with relaxation to desensitize sensory triggers, because you don't have co-regulation, because we haven't made lifestyle adjustments, it doesn't take much to get you from there to there, right? And then boop, you go right back into an overwhelm point. And so with that being said, that's why I said at the beginning, it's not that you're recovering and then the symptoms come back. It's that you've never actually recovered yet. You've just done things to temporarily mitigate the symptoms, but you haven't yet eliminated them through a body-based approach as well as a preventative lifestyle. Oh man, this is a really hard story, but I'm reading this because I want you guys to see the cycle that happens, and I want you guys to just know that you're not alone, and maybe you're resonating with some of this stuff, and maybe I'm speaking to her, but I'm also speaking to you and giving you some encouragement as well. At 16, I met a controlling individual in the Navy who manipulated every aspect of my life. This tumultuous 8-year relationship took a toll on me. Sounds like a narcissistic relationship. That definitely would just add to the cup. Do you see the history that has shaped your nervous system? So there's something called neurodiversity, and it's this understanding that everybody has unique neural connections in their brain based upon their own unique history. And so that's why when people come to me, they're like, okay, well, how long is this going to take me to heal? And I'm like, I don't know the answer to that, because you have a unique brain based upon your unique experiences. You have unique sensory triggers, you have unique challenges, and recovery is very individual in that regard. So you can't look to somebody else and be like, okay, well, it took them X amount of time to recover, that's going to be me, because they're on their own time frame, you're on their own time frame. And so anyway, with that being said, you have a brain that it looks like has been wired for threat since you were a child. And so I'm so sorry to hear about this. Okay. My second husband exhibited narcissistic behavior during our 5-year marriage, characterized by gaslighting, stonewalling, cheating, financial abuse, and constant emotional turmoil. After this relationship, I experienced 2 more episodes of DPDR, both requiring time off work. Yeah, I mean, narcissistic abuse eventually will lead to a trauma state, right? Especially complex trauma is very common whenever you are under narcissistic abuse, because especially if it's covert narcissists, they're very covert and conciliatory about their abuse. And so you really probably won't even see it coming for a long time. And by the time that you recognize it, your nervous system is probably really, really, really dysregulated, because you've had to learn to live on guard all the time in fear that you're going to take them off, right? You're walking on eggshells all the time, and you've probably forfeited being an individual. And so with that being said, you combine walking on eggshells all the time, trying to appease the narcissist and keep them from blowing up on you or give you some sort of consequence, with all the other challenges and difficulties that come in life. Complex trauma is repeated stress and adversity. Like, you're going to hit that overwhelm point eventually. And the procedure for that is depersonalization, realization for some people. And so, yeah, a lot of my clients that I've worked with have experienced narcissistic abuse. And a lot of them didn't even realize it until they started to get education, especially if it was a covert narcissist, because they're just so good at concealing their abuse. I also worked on the front line during the COVID pandemic in nursing, and during 3 months of separation from my daughters due to safety protocols and a divorce from the narcissistic husband. So yeah, I mean, COVID was extremely scary, and I know that, I had a number of nurse clients at the beginning of COVID, and they were just being worked constantly. And so I'm sure your sleep was messed up, and having to go 3 months of separation from your daughters and then going through my gosh, like, I have to tell you, like, I've worked with thousands of trauma sufferers. I have to tell you, this is like probably top 100, at least, maybe even top 50. I'm going to say just top 100 stories that I've heard. Of all the things that you've went through. 4 years of online dating added to the stress, and finally, illness and financial worries triggered another bout of DPDR. My pattern seems to involve high stress situations or when my body is physically depleted. Absolutely. Whenever you reach that point of overwhelming exhaustion in the body, that's whenever DPDR and other trauma symptoms kick in. Over time, I've tried various strategies to alleviate my symptoms, such as pretending DPDR doesn't exist. Yeah, I did that too. I was like, you know what? Maybe if I just, pretend like it's not there it's just going to go away. And it didn't work. And it would be nice if that were the case, but there's too much buildup in your body because of your painful history. And there's probably a lot of lifestyle adjustments that we need to make as well. I also tried pushing through and keeping my mind occupied. So this would be like distraction, which, you know, that's pretty deceptive because you actually can experience a temporary pause on depersonalization realization. Well, some people can if they distract enough, because this is somatic dissociation. Somatic means body, dissociation means disconnection. And so by constantly distracting your mind 24/7, only have like low to medium level buildup. It doesn't really work for people with really complex trauma histories, but low to medium buildup, for some people, they can get so deep in their head that they become completely detached from interoception, which is the experience of the embodied self, right? So distraction makes you disembodied. The more that you get into your head, the less that you are interoceptive. And so what ends up happening is people have a body that's in fight, flight, freeze response all the time. And there's all these negative sensations. They've also got, you know, all kinds of things happening in their life that they need to deal with, maybe toxic people, abusive people that they need to disconnect with, or just really stressful situations. And what they do is they end up distracting 24/7, and that disconnects them from their body, and it detaches them from the present moment. If I'm totally in my head all the time, I don't have to face what's happening in my body or in my life. And so don't mistake somatic dissociation for truly becoming symptom free. And I'm working with a few people right now that they're like, hey, since working with you, my depersonalization realization has either gotten worse or it's come back. And I'm like, yeah, we see this all the time. And it's because you're coming out of your head back into your body, and you're actually facing all the buildup in your body and life that you've been dissociated from. So yeah, you may feel worse temporarily, but we have to go through this process and release all that buildup if we really want to make you symptom free. And eventually, once you get rid of that buildup, you have proper co-regulation, the symptoms will shut off, right? So, and then you don't have to worry about them coming back because you've actually done the work instead of just running from your body and your life with distraction. And listen, I'm not against people feeling better. Depersonalization, realization are literally the most terrifying thing that I've ever experienced. And I'm happy that people are feeling better. But at the same time, I can't tell you how many people did the acceptance or the distraction stuff and it worked for a little while in that the symptoms were gone. But then the moment that they hit just a lot of stress, and it was more stress than they had experienced before, distraction didn't work and acceptance didn't work. So again, it's probably only going to work for kind of low to medium level levels of buildup of tension, adrenaline, emotion, and fatigue in the body. And for a lot of people, it doesn't work at all. I can't tell you how many people have applied to our program or worked with us that said distraction never worked for me, right? So anyway, that's just kind of my thoughts on that. And I tried distraction too. I mean, I loved that idea. I was like, well, this is the cure, right? There's so many people have seen results with this. And I was playing video games all the time. And I was telling my friends and family, like, hey, I've got to be distracted. I've got to be distracted. This is the cure. This is how I'm going to get rid of my symptoms. Like, don't talk to me right now. I've got to be distracted. It was exhausting. I was already exhausted. But now I had to constantly 24/7 keep my mind occupied. And it's one thing to kind of challenge your mind and engage your creative intellect as you're self-regulating and benefiting from co-regulation. But if your only strategy is just to distract away from your body and from the pain in your life, at best, you're putting a Band-Aid on it. You're not actually dealing with the root, and it's not a good long-term strategy. Spending time in nature, increasing sleep, exercising more, reading, solving puzzles, taking warm baths, practicing meditation, swimming, visiting the coast, abstaining from alcohol, avoiding drugs, not smoking, reduce sugar intake, and never resorting to self-harm. I've spent time with family and friends, engaged in pet therapy, and even participated in high-risk activities just to feel something. I mean, that's the thing is, you'd be surprised how many adrenaline junkies are actually people that are traumatized, and the only thing that they can do to feel something is get an extreme adrenaline rush, right? Whether it's like skydiving or extreme sports or, you know, ultra marathons or whatever. I also tried journaling and writing, and those have been therapeutic, but meditation has been the most helpful for me reconnecting with my mind and body, which I believe is crucial for my recovery. Yeah, so I mean, I'm not against meditation, but what I will tell you is, you really need a body focused approach, right? And sometimes meditation can kind of end up keeping you in your head and not really dealing with the root, which are things happening in your body. One question remains. Every time I battle, okay, so here's her question. Every time I battle through and recover, DPDR returns with vengeance. My friend, I'm going to tell you this in love, and I see this all the time. There's no shame, there's no judgment. You have never recovered from DPDR, not one time. What you're getting is a temporary break from symptoms because some of the positive things that you're doing are dropping your stress below an overwhelm point. Look at it like this. Do you see, like, this is your body and this is a level of stress? And you've got all these sensory triggers that are triggering fight, flight, freeze response in the body because you haven't done proper exposure, self-regulation, relaxation. There's also some cognitive restructuring that needs to happen, which would be like scientific education. All that is still built up. And so what'll happen is you'll be at an overwhelm point and then you'll do something, whether it's, the meditation or the taking warm baths, and then bloop, it'll drop right below an overwhelm point and you'll get a temporary break from DPDR. But then because there's all this buildup, one more thing happens, and then bloop, you go right to that overwhelm point. We have to deal with the buildup. All right, we have to. It's the only way. We need interoception, self-regulation, co-regulation, proper scientific education as well. Which, by the way, our program does include all these things. I would love for you to apply. You're like the perfect candidate for our program. We specialize in the situations that nobody knows how to deal with, right? I'm not saying my situation as far as what I went through is like the worst that I've ever heard of or anything, but it definitely was one of the more severe that I've seen after working with thousands of people from around the world. And I think that's part of why, I'm able to help with kind of those really tough cases, is because I was a really, really tough case. And also just doing this for years and years. I mean, you pretty much see almost everything, but like, a lot of people that come to us for help with our RISE program, they've tried every doctor in the book. They've tried every therapist. They've tried, alternative medicine. They've tried distraction. They've tried acceptance. They've tried like you, reading, puzzles, exercising, positive self-talk, this thing, and this thing, and it hasn't yielded them results. And then they come to us and all of a sudden they see amazing results. Why is that? Well, it's because what we're doing is not a theory. Everything that we teach is well established in the field of neuroscience and traumatology. We've got countless studies to back up everything that we're teaching, but we've also got the anecdotal evidence with the testimonials that we have, which, by the way, I've got like hundreds of testimonials that I have screenshotted, people that see results, but I'm just so busy working with clients, guys. I've kind of fallen behind on the whole marketing thing. I'm not a marketer. I'm just trying to do my best to help people through the worst period of their life. I mean, there is hope for this. Don't let your mind convince you otherwise, right? I believe this person can heal. If you're watching this, Yana, you can heal. And of course, I hope you work with me. I feel like we'd be able to help you a lot. But regardless of whether you work with me, just know that your body knows how to heal itself. You just need to set the conditions into place, which are self-regulation and co-regulation. And so anyway, with that being said, the next thing you said, how can I learn from my past traumas, accept that I need help and truly move forward to heal for good? First of all, trauma is not in the past. It's a present perception of threat where there is no threat, and your body preparing to address that threat in the form of fight, flight, freeze in the body. So we need to get your body out of fight, flight, freeze response in the present moment. And you need co-regulation as you're learning how to do that, especially with your trauma history. I really hope that you apply to work with us because we've got some options for you. As far as accepting that you need help, I mean, this is what I tell people, use avoidance-based motivation. Avoidance-based motivation is essentially where you focus on what you want to avoid to compel you to do what you need to do, even though you don't want to do it. Motivation is not a feeling. It means to possess a motive. And so the motive needs to be, I want to avoid this cycle. I want to avoid just getting temporary breaks from symptoms, but never true recovery, right? I don't know how old you are, but you can salvage the last part of your life. I'm telling you, as somebody who spent most of his life either in fight or flight or the freeze response, the years that I've been symptom free, it's beyond words. The peace. I've been able to build a beautiful family. We have a beautiful home, and I'm able to be present. I'm able to enjoy my life, and I'm able to help people from all around the world too. I'm able to focus on what I want to do in life. And it's almost like once you're symptom free, it doesn't matter how long the symptoms were there. Just like a day of being symptom free feels like a year. It's incredible. It really, really is. And it's worth fighting for. You know, people are motivated by either a future benefit or they're motivated by the desire to avoid a consequence. And what I will tell you is the desire to avoid a consequence works better for traumatized people because your brain in a trauma state has trouble seeing a future. And so, yet, your brain will compel you to avoid things because your brain's already wired for avoidance, right? Think about it. I avoid my body, I avoid life, and I feel better. And so if you can't beat your enemy, join them. So whenever you frame discipline, which is going through this recovery process in terms of avoidance, your brain is like, okay, all right, I'll help you. I'll help motivate you to do that. But anyway, ultimately you're going to have to be disciplined, which means doing what you don't want to do, even though you don't feel like it. But focusing on that motive to avoid this cycle repeating itself and missing out on the last part of your life being enjoyable, that's going to push you to go through this process. Okay. Anyway, I think that's it. You said, thank you for giving me the space to be raw and real, warm wishes, and a happy new year to all. Thank you, Yana, for taking that time to write to me. And regardless of whether you work with us, I just want you to know that you can heal. You're amazing. And I see people heal all the time who have had, extreme histories just like you. And that is it. If this inspired you, if this gave you some hope, make sure to click the like button. Based on the comments that I'm seeing, I think I'm going to keep doing these. I feel like it's, generating a lot of encouragement for people, a lot of hope. And I'm also able to kind of splice this video up into a bunch of little short clips that kind of speak on various topics that I think encourages a lot of people. So anyway, with that being said, also we do have our 5 shifts deal from trauma, anxiety, panic, and depersonalization realization masterclass. It's a 45-minute masterclass. It took me 6 months to make it. I literally poured my heart and soul into it, and it's going to show you the 5 things that you need to do in order to truly get to the root of those symptoms. There also is a button that you can click at any point during the video where you can apply to work with us. And if you can't work with us, we'll do our best to try to, direct you somewhere to get help. But we definitely hope that you're able to work with us. Anyway, that's it, guys. Click like if this helped you. Comment something below. Let me know anything that, like what resonated with you from this video. Did you relate with Yana's story? Share this video as well with anybody that, you feel would be encouraged by this. Again, click like, just all that stuff helps this rank. Again, I'm not the marketing guru, and so that really would help me a lot. All right, guys, you're amazing, and I will talk to you real soon.